Weeks ago, we asked a pretty obvious question on the show. How did Maxine Waters, a Democratic congressman, get so rich? Waters has held elected office for pretty much continuously 40 years. She represents one of the poorest districts in California. Yet somehow she lives in a $4.3 million mansion in one of the richest and whitest neighborhoods in L.A., which, by the way, is not even in her own district. Now, we're not alleging wrongdoing here, but really, how did that happen? The New York Times talked to Waters recently, and here's how she responded to this show and our question. Quoting now, "I own several properties. The way me, talked about it is, what right does an African-American woman have to do well? He doesn't know anything about my investments, about the house that I've lived in for 25, 30 years. This idea of how could she afford that is racist, and I just dismiss it." In other words, we're bigots for asking the question. You surprised? I mean, what else was she going to say? By the way, it doesn't look like she's lived in that house for 25 or 30 years. Real estate records suggest she just bought it 13 years ago and has spent an awful lot since to remodel it. So again, where'd the money come from? Maybe she borrowed it from relatives. Since 2006, Waters has paid her own daughter $600,000 from campaign funds. Then there's her husband, who was once a director of One United Bank. Never heard of it? Well, in 2008, One United Bank got a $12 million taxpayer bailout after Waters encouraged the Treasury Department to take up the case. At the time, she did not disclose that her husband had worked there or that she still had stock holdings in that bank. Maybe those were the investments she mentioned. Or maybe she was referring to the more than $1 million the LA Times reported that her family has made by doing business with companies and people she's helped in Congress. By the way, that was almost 20 years ago. Now, some people think all this is a little unseemly, if not criminal. One liberal group ranked Waters as among the most corrupt members of Congress. We are withholding judgment on that, despite the Congresswoman's name-calling, but we really would like a real answer. We've asked Waters to appear on this show many times to explain, and we're going to keep asking. Well, the Trump administration has decided finally to end a CIA program that arms anti-Assad rebels in Syria. There are a lot of reasons to do this. A lot of these supposedly moderate rebels were not moderate at all. They wound up aligned with al-Qaeda. A lot of the weapons we gave them fell into the hands of ISIS and other crazy people. And, of course, it's not even clear that we should be involved in Syria at all. At minimum, this is a coherent decision. That's not how the Washington Post or other media in this city described it. The headline of the Post read this way: Trump ends covert CIA program to arm anti-Assad rebels in Syria, comma, a move sought by Moscow. In other words, Trump is doing this because Putin wants him to. There could be no other reason. Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard represents the proud state of Hawaii, and she joins us tonight. So even, we were talking in the commercial break, even, Congresswoman, if you were for regime change in Syria, you were very anti-Assad, I don't think there's much defense of this specific program, is there?
There's not, and this is the problem, is, you know, the Syrian people have been crying out for peace for so long, and the media completely is missing the point here about what is being reported, that Trump is ending this CIA program, as you described. But for the benefit of your viewers, let's talk about what the CIA program actually was. It's been widely reported that for years now, the CIA was providing arms, intelligence, money, and other types of support to these armed militants who were working hand in hand and who are working hand in hand, and oftentimes under the command of al-Qaeda in Syria. So this isn't a matter of, like, we're giving weapons to people, but they end up falling in the wrong hands. We are directly arming armed militants who are working under the command of al-Qaeda, all in this effort to overthrow the Syrian government.
That is grotesque. I'm honestly and sincerely confused. Why would anyone defend this?
It is this addiction to regime change. And this idea that somehow this is what must be done, again, without actually looking at the fact that we have been providing direct and indirect support to al-Qaeda, this very same terrorist group that attacked us on 9/11 and that we are supposed to be continuing to be fighting against and trying to defeat. And the thing that should make everyone feel sick is that people would rather support directly and indirectly al-Qaeda than actually give up their regime change goals.
So you are a progressive Democrat from one of the most liberal states in the world, agreeing with Donald Trump on this specific piece of policy. What kind of reaction do you get from your fellow Democrats in the House?
Look, for years, even through the Obama administration, I've been advocating to bring about an end to this program, and I'm continuing, actually, through the introduction of my bill, the Stop Arming Terrorists Act, to make sure that our government does not use taxpayer dollars to provide this kind of support, whether it's weapons, intelligence, or money, or anything else, directly or indirectly to these terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda. And the reason why this is so important is because while reports are saying that the Trump administration has ended this CIA program, it could very easily be changed and reinstated in a month or 6 months, or it could rear its ugly head again in another country, but also because our so-called allies in Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Qatar, and these other countries, they are continuing to provide direct and indirect support to these terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda. And my bill would bring about an end to this.
But how frustrating. I mean, I am positive you've been denounced as a Russian agent. I think anybody who raises questions has been. Russia seems to have corrupted, whatever you think of the charges, corrupted rational conversation about foreign policy.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate, and the people who are suffering are people in countries like Syria, people in countries like Yemen who are suffering as a result of our policies, and they have been directly counterproductive to our own national security. How we could allow the use of American taxpayer dollars to strengthen Al-Qaeda is beyond me, and that's what I'm fighting to stop.
And if you're against it, you're a Russian agent. Just for the record, have you ever sworn an oath to Vladimir Putin?
For the record, I have not.
Have not. All right, good. I just, you know, I feel like
you clarified
in
that,
Washington 2017, we just need to be absolutely sure.
Yeah.
Great to see you, Congresswoman.
Nice to see you, Tucker. Thanks. Aloha.
Is it okay to use gender-based insults as long as you're a liberal in good standing? Dumb question. Of course, the answer is yes. You can do whatever you want. We've got yet another example from today. We never get sick of these. On Monday morning, Daily Beast writer Ira Madison III tweeted out a picture of Sarah Huckabee Sanders, the new press secretary over at the White House, along with the caption, "Butch Queen, first time in drag at ball." Now, for those of you who are not hip to lingo like that, he's basically suggesting that she is a bad male cross-dresser. Madison, Ira Madison III, is worth noting, is the same writer who ridiculed Jeff Sessions for having an adopted Asian granddaughter at his confirmation hearings. He later deleted that tweet but has not apologized for it. And, of course, no one's asked him to because he's a liberal, so, like, whatever. It's not bad. Tammy Bruce and Ether Behrman are both radio show hosts, and they join us tonight. Thank you for coming on, both of you. So, Tammy, I mean, we could go on for hours, but, like, does anybody on the left ever get in trouble for using language that people on the right would lose their jobs over?
You know, they don't, and this is the problem. If we're going to, as minorities, going to insist that we're somehow morally superior to people, maybe it would be helpful if there was actually some decent behavior involved, right? I mean, as a gay woman, I want everyone to have equal opportunity. I want everyone to be treated decently. That's really should be the foundation of any civil rights movement, of equal opportunity, equal treatment, being able to live our lives as we see fit. And it's a good argument to make, and it's a legitimate one. But it's difficult to be able to hold that foundation if you're on the left when in fact you then continue to be the bully. That you're the one who says, well, you stand up for women, you're going to march and you're going to make those pink caps and you stand up for every woman. But when it comes to women in the Trump administration, not only are you going to call them names, you're going to objectify them based on their appearance. And it's not just Sarah Huckabee Sanders, it's also Kellyanne Conway, who was portrayed as a fatal attraction type of woman on Saturday Night Live. It's all really the women who have supported the president. And part of it, I have to argue, and I'll leave with this point, is that I think there's also some religious bigotry involved here as well, that's one of the differences with these women compared perhaps to liberal women, some of whom are people of faith, but I don't think that we can ignore that.
No, I think that's right. So, Ethan, I talk for a living, so I'm interested in what the rules are. So I thought the rules were you weren't allowed to attack people on the basis of their immutable characteristics, the basis of their sex or their race. You can't make fun of that stuff. It's not funny. And yet, I don't know, I see Joe Biden refer to Barack Obama as, you know, clean and articulate, and he gets picked as VP. I see this Ira Madison character call her, you know, mock her sexuality and her sex, and yet it's like not a big deal. Why is that allowed?
Well, I mean, again, we're using a single example here of somebody who insulted.
And by the way,
Well, okay, so two examples. Well, one was from a while ago at that point. But we have an example. We have an insulter-in-chief right now who all the way through the campaign was busy insulting people, setting the tone for the country. He's now the president. The president does set the tone for the country, and that includes insulting people on a regular basis.
So what is the argument that you're making?
What Ira said.
So what is the argument that you're making, that because Trump does it, it's okay? I mean, I thought the whole point was Trump's not supposed to do that. We're horrified that he does it. We're taking a moral stand against him doing it, but now we're doing it ourselves? Doesn't that kind of undercut the case?
Yeah, and I just, you know, was saying that I don't agree with what Ira said. I think it's actually wrong to do that kind of a low-level, guttural criticism. By the way, if you look at his other writing on Daily Beast, this is kind of what he does, is hurl insults. He's not the most positive writer. This isn't the best example, and surely does not represent people left of center in terms of the way we speak about our political opponents. I don't agree with it. I don't agree with political violence either.
It doesn't represent the left? I mean, I don't go on social media too much because like, I've got a job, but every time I'm there, I notice, and I'm sure you do too, both of you, that like the left is totally... This is like normal, Tammy.
Yeah, let me just remind everybody also, the comparison of women who are conservative to men or gay men or transsexuals, also Ann Coulter has faced that as well. I mean, it's a strange kind of homophobic, transphobic attack on women who are conservative to accuse them somehow of being men. And this is what I also find strange. My first book, interestingly enough, like 15 years ago, was about the New Thought Police, was how the racism, sexism, and homophobia live on the left, that all of this is actually projection. And at this point, and look, it's never going to end, but the Americans who are watching this program have got to realize that those who stand up and say, we're your moral betters and we're the ones you can count on, are actually the ones who are making the problem worse and are the ones who are engaging in it.
Then maybe, Ethan, we should, look, I would be happy to live in a world where nobody got fired for saying something stupid. That's not the world we live in. Liberals are always pushing people to get canned for saying something stupid. Can you agree that maybe we should all just lighten up and I'll give this Ira Madison, the third guy, a pass, and you know what I mean? And like stop crushing people who say something dumb. Are you allowed to go with that?
Yeah, I actually... Tucker, you and I agree. This is wonderful. We actually came together tonight. Yeah, I agree with you. I think there's so much overreaction that's going on with boycotts, with getting people fired. I don't agree with that. I am a believer in speech, and I think that some people need to grow a little bit thicker skin, and we need to be teaching in college something like insensitivity, so everything is not so deeply offensive.
Well, they're going to come after you if you keep talking like that, Ethan. Good luck. Thank you both. Tammy, Ethan, I appreciate it.
Thanks, Tucker.